Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at a power supply that isn't rubbish. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at a power supply from EVGA. Yay! Finally at last we've got a known branded power supply on the channel, and there's a very good reason for it, and that reason is purely price. That's what it comes down to, price, ladies and gentlemen. This at the moment is got to be one of the deals of the century. Currently this is retailing on amazon.co.uk, sold by and dispatched by Amazon for £38 and a few pence. This is the deal of the century. Normally this would retail somewhere in the region of about £69.99. It certainly does on places like eBuyer, Overclockers, etc. Prices on power supplies do tend to fluctuate quite dramatically, especially during mining crazes and all kinds of things. So to have this at this price at the moment is madness, it really is. The rest of the range, unfortunately, the 650, 750, etc., they haven't had such a massive reduction in pricing on amazon.co.uk currently. I'll put the links in the video description as I always do, and I have also posted this to some of you that subscribe to the channel on the YouTube community tab as well, so some of the subscribers can get a heads up before this thing sells out, which I think it probably will do, especially at this price. So anyway, we'll do a quick unboxing, go through all the connections, etc, etc. If you do want a full rundown of all the specs and how well this power supply actually copes in a real world basis, then those lovely people over at Hexus.net have done a fantastic review where they compared this against the Corsair RM650, and yeah, surprisingly it's very, very close. So yeah, this is definitely one to watch out for. So I'll put links for that in the video description as well, so you can check out the full technical specs. This, as you well know, will be just an unboxing. We'll go through my opinions, pricing, that kind of thing. We don't have the ability or the technology to test it in that kind of scientific way, but certainly yeah, it's gonna get my thumbs up anyway. It's less than 40 quid. It's fully modular, EVGA, and it's bronze rated. Come on, you shouldn't need to watch the rest of the video, just go and buy one now, click on the links. Anyway, I'm really excited. Let's take this thing out of the box and see what we get. And actually, we'll take a look at the box first of all, as we generally tend to. So as you can see, EVGA, it's the 550 B5 range, 80 plus bronze rated, and also, yeah, bronze rated power supply. You get the general idea. On the back it goes through, this thing is actually really heavy. I know I normally don't have branded power supplies as such, I do have the kind of more cheap ones, let's say. This certainly feels really, really heavy already, and for a 550, yeah, it's extraordinary. Anyway, so on the back, yeah, you've got some details there. I'll put some close-ups on the screen for that, and also it tells you what cables are included, but we'll go through that in great depth. Also tells you about the temperature settings, all that kind of stuff. This actually has got eco mode on it as well, so it's even though it is a relatively inexpensive power supply and kind of quite low in terms of how things go, it does have eco mode as well. So there's an eco mode switch. You can turn the fan so that it'll only start spinning after it gets to around about 55 degrees C in the power supply, so otherwise it will remain completely silent. So yeah, that is pretty cool. Got the specs there for the individual rails, which we'll take a closer look at later. Also, it's got an ultra quiet FDB 135mm fan, so that is a fluid dynamic bearing for those of you who are not sure. So basically it means it's going to be pretty darn quiet even if it is spinning at full whack. Also, it says there, fully modular design, which we'll take a look at now. Okay, so what do we get actually in the box, you're asking? And let's answer that question straight away. So first of all, you get your instruction guide and kind of details, etc. Also, it tells you about the other models that are available. So there's a 550, a 650, a 750, and an 850. Yep, usual kind of stuff. So yep, you can take a look at that. Also included is a power supply tester and some mounting screws. So the power supply tester is actually a really cool thing, especially these days when you've got PSUs and you've also got CPUs and motherboards that aren't always compatible straight out of the box. If for some reason you're trying to do like a BIOS flashback or something, it's always worth checking that the power supply does actually work. So using one of these, basically all it does is shorts out two of the pins, plug that into your power supply, plug the power supply into the mains, and it will turn on. Well, at least you'll see the fan spinning. You will have to have the power supply not in eco mode. In eco mode, you won't see the fan spinning, so make sure that's turned off, and then you'll see if it's actually working or not. So anyway, there's that, and also some mounting screws, which is awesome. There are some actually really cool cable ties here, which are Velcro cable ties, or zip ties, or loop ties, whatever you want to call them. So they're all Velcroed, so you can do some cable management. Those are really nice to use. You get 4 of those in there. Also, you get a UK power plug. Obviously, if you're buying this outside of the United Kingdom, then yeah, you'll have a cable which is suitable for your particular region. And actually, talking of that, because of the way this power supply is rated for the 80 plus, it does kind of do better in the UK than it does in America because of how the energy efficiencies work out. So over here in the UK, this can get anywhere up to around about 92, 91% of efficiency with the curve, as I'll show you on the screen. The US, because of the way the voltage works over there, is slightly lower, which is basically why it's rated as a bronze power supply. Really, if it was a UK only one, it would probably be silver, kind of borderline into gold. So yeah, really nice little power supply. Next up, we've got the cabling, so we'll go through that in detail shortly. Yeah, there's tons of cables there. It's really nice to see actually that the cables are all blacked out, so all black cabling, and also there is the kind of mesh sheathing around it as well to give that little bit of extra protection. So if it's going against some case kind of edges, whatever, even if it does manage to kind of rub that through, it's going to protect the cables pretty well. So not always brilliant for cable management for slightly tinier cases, especially in the budget market. So do bear that in mind. If you do need flat cables, then you might need to look elsewhere, but certainly these are pretty strong, pretty decent. And of course, because it's EVGA, you can definitely go out and get yourself a set of cables made up which will fit with this, no problem at all. It will obviously cost you extra, but you can get cables made up from Cable Mods, those kind of places. And last of all, we've got the power supply itself, which is actually quite a weighty unit. So let's start with the bottom, or top, depending on which way you mount it. So this is the 135mm FDB fan, so fluid dynamic bearing, nice and quiet, and it's got the EVGA markings on the fan blades, very much like you get with some of the graphics cards, that kind of thing as well. So that's pretty cool, and there's a really nice design motif around there. So yeah, that's pretty decent. Looking at this side, so we've got the EVGA 550 B5, 80 plus rating, and also again the specs, which you'll see from a close-up. Moving around to the back, so we've got our cable input for power supply. You've got a nice rocker switch there for power on and off, and we've got the eco button, which is there, so tiny little button, so on and off, clearly labelled up so you know which mode is which. I don't like eco mode buttons which are just push ones, because you push it and you're not really sure which mode it's in. So this is really nice, very clear, very simple, says what it is, eco, and it says off and it says on. Very, very easy to understand and use. Also as well, we've got this ventilation area here to let the warm air out the back, which is yeah, what you pretty much expect to see. Yep, seen that side. On that side you've got the EVGA logo, BS. This is what will be basically facing outward. So mounted in a normal PC, if you've got a cutout section for your basement area, this is what you're going to see facing you. If you mount it obviously fan side up, then you'll get to see that. Looking at the back of the power supply, so this is where we've got our connectivity. So we've got the top section here, which is for a motherboard, so that is both of those together. Then you've got your SATA 1, SATA 2, peripherals, and then you've got CPU 1 and VGA 1. And this is one thing which is kind of one of the, not really a massive downside, but a potential issue for some of you. Obviously, if you're looking at a high-end graphics card in your system or a high-end CPU, then this possibly isn't the power supply for you anyway. Being that it only has one CPU output, so that's an 8-pin output, if you've got a motherboard which needs a 4 and 8 or 2 8s, then yeah, this power supply possibly isn't for you. Same goes with the graphics card. If you need a graphics card with more than 2 8-pin connections, then yeah, you're going to be out of luck with this one. You could obviously fudge it from some of the peripheral connections, from SATA, etc., but it's not ideal, but certainly you could get away with it like that. But this is the limitations. So one CPU breakout, so that is 2 times 4-pin connectors, and one VGA output, which is 2 times 6+2 connections, which we'll take a look at right now. Okay, so let's do a breakdown of the cables. So first of all, we'll pull this one out. So this is your main 24-pin motherboard connection, and really nice to see that it does say MB on there for motherboard, or Mills and Boon, or Milton Bradley, whichever the case may be. So that just plugs into the PSU one end, motherboard the other end, so that's really good. Quite a nice long cable there, it's probably best part of about 24 inches there. What have we got? So next one is a peripheral connection. So this is a 6-pin peripheral connection, so that goes into the periph part on there. And that has got 1, 2, 3 Molex style connectors. So yeah, for things like maybe fan controllers, that kind of thing, or if you've got some sort of water cooling, maybe like a D5 pump, they would use a Molex connection. So yeah, that is perfect for those. Obviously, all of these, if you don't need to use them, then you can leave them unplugged and chuck them back in the box just in case you need them at a later date. Next one is a SATA lead, so it just says on there, again, SATA, so nice and easy to understand. And again, pretty much the same sort of length, about 24 inches. I'll try and put the lengths of the cables in the video description after, just so to be sure. And on this one, you've got 3 SATA style connectors on there, and all of them appear to be facing the same direction, yep, which is cool. So 3 drives potentially on there, or maybe, again, RGB controller, that sort of thing. Then we've got another one, another SATA one, as you can see, it says SATA on there with another 3 connections. So yeah, that one's identical. And the next one we have is the VGA B5. So it says on the side what it is, VGA B5. So if you've got a ton of these things knocking around, or you've got a few modular power supplies, it's really cool that it actually says on there what it is, who makes it, and which power supply it's from. So yeah, that's actually quite a nice little touch. So that is the one for the graphics card. Again, similar sort of in length there, so about 24 inches from the first connector to the end to the power supply. And then you've got an additional probably about 4 or 5 inches there to go from one connection into another. So for either a kind of SLI, or if you've got them right next to each other. Another downside again, if you are using this on a graphics card which needs both connectors, then you are left with kind of like a little bit of a bunched up cable situation for cable management, which is a little bit of a downside of these kind of braided cables rather than being the flat black ones, which are, in my opinion, a little bit easier to manage. But again, you can use cable extensions, or cable mods can get you some new cables made up. So that has got the 6+2, so you can use it on its own as a 6-pin PCIe or a 8-pin PCIe, and the same for that one. So maybe you've got a graphics card which has got an 8 and a 6, or it's 2 8s or 2 6s, combinations thereof, you can use it in either way, so it's absolutely fine. Obviously, you're going to be limited by the limitations of the power supply itself and how many amps it gives out, all that kind of stuff. So just do bear that in mind, and look at your manufacturers when you're buying the graphics card. Look on the box and see if what it says is the rated kind of minimum for your actual graphical load. Next one up is our CPU. So again, it says on there CPU, which is awesome. So that just plugs in, and this CPU end splits into the 2x4. So that is your kind of Intel P4 connectors as they used to be known. I think they changed them now to like a C1 or C3, but basically it's the CPU connector, so there's 8 pins there altogether. Also included is a little bit of a blast from the past. So this is a 4-pin Molex to floppy drive connector. So if you've got a floppy disk drive in your computer, or maybe some kind of fan monitoring hub, or sometimes even slightly older SATA or maybe RAID cards, sometimes use that connection. So potentially you might have a use for that, but certainly it's there if you need it. So let's have a quick drill down through the specs of the power supply. So on the 3.3 volt rails, 24 amps. On the 5 volt rail, you're looking at 24 amps, giving you 120 watts combined. And on the 12 volt rail, we're looking at 54.8 amps, giving you 550 watts. So they're not adding the rails together there, purely they're saying it's a 550 watt power supply because there is 550 watts coming out of the 12 volt rail, which is how power supplies should be rated. So this, in theory, if you're buying a slightly cheaper branded power supply where they combine them together, then this would be closer to a kind of 700 watt or maybe a 650 watt power supply. So do bear that in mind when you're making your purchases. Don't go blindly into the specs of what it says on your eBay or Amazon listings of 650 watt power supply or 700 watt power supply. Do take into account what the rails are actually putting out. The 3 volt and your 5 volt rails are pretty much redundant these days to some extent. The 12 volt rail is where it's at, and that is the one where you do want to have the most amperage on. So do pay close attention to your amperage on the 12 volt rail. And obviously, again, when you're looking at graphics cards, looking at building a system, you can go to things like wattage calculator and work out what your system actually needs, and then you can buy a power supply based on that. But really, this has mainly been about how much this one costs at the moment. Again, for less than £40 for an EVGA bronze power supply that is fully modular, I think this is an absolute steal. And please do let me know in the comment section below what you think of it. Do you think you can actually buy anything better on the market at the moment in the UK? I certainly don't think so. I've gone through a lot of the budget power supplies, and we do scour the sales every single day of the year looking for those bargains, and this, as far as I'm concerned, pretty much is the best one of the year so far. But again, let me know what you think in the comment section below. In the meantime, I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we will catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.